Hello, everyone. Welcome to Doombrook's Tuesday at 10. My name is Jean Ann Cannon, and we are so very lucky to have Julie Kissee here with us today. Julie, you could not have come at a better time giving our week. We're recording this for today, January 12th, when we're posting this, but we actually are recording this on Friday, January 8th. And the reason I say that is what a crazy week. Not only a crazy year, but a crazy week. So I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about our programs, but just very briefly, Doombrook does child abuse prevention and intervention for 32 years, over 32 years. Our intervention piece is where we interview suspected cases, children of suspected cases of abuse. We're so fortunate to be able to do that one on one with safe social distancing. Our prevention pieces are healthy families, where we go into homes, all free, to teach expectant and new moms how to be a parent and dads, and family management and all the concerns that come in with being a new parent. And then our public education, where we go into the schools. So, as Julie asked me earlier, we do that now both on one for schools that are in person and some video, virtual public ed given the COVID. So we are thrilled to have you, Julie, and I'd like to get right into your experience and such a timely topic, which is stress and anxiety. But before we get into that, Julie, just so everyone knows, Julie is the administrative director of their Employee Assistance Program, EAP, at Franciscan Health. And she has been with them for 18 years, which is fabulous. And why don't you maybe just start out, Julie, with telling us a little bit about yourself or your family and work?
Sure. So, I've been with Franciscan Health for, 18 years. I did my master's internship with the EAP program. And I worked within the program as a therapist. And then prior to being with EAP, I worked in substance abuse in Northwest Indiana. I'm a Regionite. I grew up in Hammond my entire life. And have been in the area. So I've worked within all of our facilities. I'm also a certified leadership coach. So I've worked within all of our facilities within Hammond, Dyer, Munster, Crown Point, Michigan City. So I've really worked in a lot of the communities and with a lot of our community representatives in the entire northern region. So I love working. We in Franciscan EAP, we consider ourselves the caregivers of the caregivers. So, when we talk about, especially right now with the pandemic, there is just so much added stress, anxiety, and depression that's coming with what's going on right now. That this time we have so many people who are trying to balance what the responsibilities of life and parenting and work, and people who are just experiencing such high levels of stress. It's just been a journey for the last almost 10 months, 11 months. Yeah. So, I'm married. I have one biological, two gifted children to me, and I have four grandchildren that have my heart, three boys and one girl. So a lot of testosterone in my family. I know how to deal with boys, and my husband is a wonderful supporter. So my family is all fairly local, so I do have a lot of support around me, which is very important for mental health. And right now I think that is another contributor that a lot of people struggle with, not having a support system is another issue that we deal with. So but that's my life turned on its side.
That's wonderful, Julie. And I guess
Thanks.
maybe what we might start out with is, for those listening, defining anxiety and stress. You say those words, but like, We all have anxiety and stress. We're all worried about COVID. This week, in Washington, D.C. was horrible. We worry about politics. Define maybe a little bit, if you would, Julie, what is anxiety and stress, and when's an indicator of when you should get outside help?
Okay. So if you want to look at stress and a definition of stress, so anxiety is a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, basically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. So anxiety is a feeling that we have and we've had since the beginning of time. It doesn't necessarily mean it's something negative.
Uh-huh,
It's a protective measure for us. It's
uh-huh,
kind of like a feeling that says, hey, something may need attention. So
uh-huh.
anxiety is a normal feeling or a trigger that says, hey, something's going on here. There's something unknown. And do you need to be alerted? Do you need to, it kind of triggers our fight or flight response. Do you
Sure.
need to flee? Like in the old days, it would have been, in the caveman days, it would have been like a dinosaur's coming. You either need to run
Right.
or do
Or
you
you're
need to
dead.
fight,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
Um, in today's day and age, we can't, pick up a club and beat something to death.
Yeah.
That's not really acceptable. So for today's day and age, it's what do I need to do to survive? It's kind of like our survival skill. So
Okay.
that's anxiety. So in some cases, it's a good thing. But when we start to have anxiety that we don't deal with or don't know how to deal with or can't deal with, or that it's just coming at us over and over, and we just don't know what to do with all of that, and it literally starts to impact how we're dealing with things in our life or not dealing with things, like when we avoid it for too long or we don't address it for too long. That's when we start have to looking at those signs and figure out what needs to be addressed. And so we can talk about that in a minute. Stress, on the other hand, is really generally, it refers to two different things. First thing is the psychological perception of pressure, like, something is kind of heavy for us, whether that's maybe a deadline that's coming, or there's just so much coming at us, and it can be real or perceived. It may be that we're putting added pressures on ourselves. If there's somebody that that's a perfectionist, it has to be done a certain way and by a certain time or something like that. That can be a form of stress for one person, but for somebody else, that might not be stressful.
Sure.
So stress is very much related to a perception.
Wow.
The second thing is really our body's response to that perception of pressure. So
Uh-huh.
it really contributes to two things, and anxiety can lead to that stress response.
I
So
see.
when we talk about anxiety, we generally talk about anxiety leading to stress. When we talk about like work anxiety and work stress, or anxiety in a life situation,
Yeah.
right now we talk about COVID stress and
Yeah.
COVID anxiety and COVID fear. And that's really playing a big part in the increase in anxiety and depression. Right now, there's a huge increase in the reports of individuals experiencing anxiety and depression, not necessarily clinical anxiety and depression, but situational anxiety and depression,
Right.
because of the perceived pressures and the perceived fear of the unknown. That's another definition that people will use for anxiety: fear of the unknown. We
Right.
don't know what's around the corner, so we have this anxiety. It's building up within us.
Right. And one of the things question I have, Julie, as I stated earlier, was um, all of us, it's so interesting when you talk about perceived stress and what's stress for you may be not stress for me, what's stress for me may not be stressful to you, but it's what we individually think. Can you address a little bit about when should a person, like, we get that everyone has different feelings about this COVID. Some people have had the severity of someone passing away in their family. Other people don't even wear masks. So my question is, the heaviness of the idea of COVID and it not going away for months and months until we all get vaccinated, et cetera, when should a person get help or reach
So,
out for help?
so when somebody should reach out for help is when it starts to really impact the quality or the ability to do um, either daily activities, work activities, interacting with people. If you start to rely on unhealthy coping mechanisms, like if your coping mechanisms aren't working anymore. So I'll give you an example. Stress is going to manifest itself, and anxiety is going to manifest itself in certain ways. If you don't have healthy coping mechanisms, it's really going to start to impact in unhealthy ways. Headaches, inability to sleep, digestive issues. Stress will really impact every single uh, body function it can.
So
So
physically, right?
yeah,
Physically,
you can start losing weight or gaining weight because you can't eat or that you eat too much. You won't be able to sleep, so you'll have difficulty sleeping or you'll sleep too much. So when there is a significant change in your normal ability to respond to those situations that you just can't respond to anymore.
okay.
Those would be the times that you really need to start looking at, am I really being negatively impacted by my anxiety or my stress levels? Those would be when I would say,
Okay.
you may need to reach out and talk to somebody or interact
Right.
with a provider or a family member or some type of support system that would allow you assistance to
That's
start
great.
dealing.
So if someone, Julie, doesn't know if it's negatively impacting them, maybe an idea is, I think what I'm hearing you say is that they should reach out to someone and ask.
Yeah.
Ask if that's problematic. Is this a time I should go? There's no harm in asking someone.
Yes. So the other thing that I might recommend too
Uh-huh.
is those people that you're closest to,
Yes.
ask them,
Huh. That's good.
make a buddy system kind of a thing to
Hmm.
say, you know what, you're my eyes and ears. The people you love are
Oh,
going to
that's a
notice
great
changes in your
idea.
behavior before you do.
Yeah, that's a
So
great idea.
yeah, the best thing would be to say, so I would use my husband. He's going to notice in me if I'm cranky or crabby or acting different, probably long before I will. So, but I have to also be open to receive
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
feedback.
It's
So,
not
so
always the
that's why
case.
I say, yeah, that's why I say make like a buddy pact to say,
Sure.
I need you to tell me when I'm getting that way, so that I can maybe do some self reflection. Because, like I said, anxiety or stress or our feelings are generally kind of ways for our body and our mind and our spirit to tell us something needs attention, whether it's our emotions that are telling us maybe something's bothering you that you need to address.
Sure.
And so yeah, sometimes we don't recognize it,
Yep.
but everyone around us recognizes it.
Yeah.
But we have to find that person that we trust enough to tell us the hard stuff.
That's great. And
Yeah.
and so I guess again I'm hearing you say just ask. Start with your loved ones and say, "Are you seeing me doing anything that doesn't seem healthy?"
Yeah,
On
because
one
I'll be
level.
honest with you, I'd rather hear it from my husband than my boss.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah. And Julie, if someone feels like they want to try some at-home coping mechanisms prior to reaching out professionally, what might you recommend? I know that's a big question. Everyone's different, but
That is. So there's actually quite a lot of things that somebody can do on their own. One of the things that I often recommend to individuals is doing self check-ins. So, and this is really easy if you can get into the habit. Generally, just even having like a daily
oh,
journal or a weekly journal
okay.
that is basically there for self check-in. And this
Okay.
is good because you can use it in multitude of different ways. You can use it, say, for example, at the beginning of the day or the beginning of the week, you can say, here are some of the things that I want to accomplish this week. So you can
Okay.
use it to set some goals.
Uh-huh.
Then at the end of the week, you can do a check-in, or at the end of every day, do a check-in. Some people, the reason I'm saying either every day or every week is some people are good with doing it every day. Some people
Uh-huh.
don't need it every day. That's too
Sure.
much. So you have to find the kind of rhythm for
Balance. Yeah.
yourself. Everybody's different. But the process would be to do a self check-in to say, how was I today? What went well? And how did that make me feel? And what did I accomplish? What am I grateful for? And all of those things are to help build resilience and to really kind of change our thought patterns from the negative that creates that stress and creates that anxiety, and really changes our thought pattern to really look for the good, because that
Uh-huh.
gets hard sometimes when we're stressed out and
Sure.
we're anxious. So, but the other thing you can do with that journaling is to
Uh-huh.
say what didn't go so well and
Uh-huh.
what contributed to that, and what can I do differently tomorrow so
Uh-huh.
that I can get better in that area. So it's also a self check-in to say, what do I need to maybe work on? What do I need to maybe do differently? It's not about beating yourself up about what you're doing wrong. It's about what needs to be tweaked, what needs to
Yeah.
be evolved, what's not working,
Yeah.
quite right, that I can maybe do something wrong. We never really do a lot of self-evaluation like that,
Mm-hmm.
to really kind of look at ourselves, to look at it as a positive.
Sure.
I continuously look at myself as I'm a work in progress. I'm never going to be finished.
Right.
Every day is a new day to work on some aspect somewhere. That can
Right.
always change because the world is always changing. The world around us is always changing. So being able to do self check-ins, am I okay? Am I
Gosh,
good?
that's great, Julian. And I think you're saying too is it takes time to do self check-ins, and that if we're worried that we're being anxious and stressed and it's negatively affecting our life, the self check-in will give us an opportunity to see the pluses and the minuses and what to do. And that takes time, and some people don't like to take the time, but it's how necessary that is. And to not as you're saying, Julie, not judge ourselves. We beat ourselves up. We're not good enough. What's wrong with us that we can't handle this stress?
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing too is to give yourself a little bit of grace.
That's
you know,
so nice to hear.
ask yourself, if you were talking to your friend,
Yeah,
what would you say to your friend?
yeah,
And write that down and then repeat it to yourself.
yeah.
Read
Gosh,
it to
that's nice,
yourself,
Julie. That's so nice.
because you're right. We are so hard on ourselves.
Mhm.
And the self talk that we give to ourselves is really harsh sometimes.
Right.
And so sometimes, that can help as well, is to say, if I were talking to Susie right now, what would
Yeah,
I tell Susie? And let me write that down if
yeah.
Susie were in front of me. And then read it back to yourself and mean
Sure.
it, you
Yeah.
know, because you deserve the same message that
Right.
Susie
Yeah.
deserves.
Like,
But we never give ourselves that same message. We're usually 90% of the time much harder on
yeah,
ourselves than
beating
we are
ourselves
on
up.
anyone else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think no one taught us that when we were little for the most part, that we get a lot more done if we're gentle on ourselves instead of, well, I think some of us, and I should speak for myself, the belief system that if you beat yourself up enough, you're going to fly right. Well,
Yeah.
it's really just
Yeah.
the opposite.
Yeah. The last thing that I want to say
Yeah.
that people can do at home, and this is a really easy type of exercise to do, is get a piece of paper and just in the middle, draw a small circle, and
Uh-huh.
then draw a circle out side of that, just
Uh-huh.
slightly bigger.
Uh-huh.
So in the middle of that circle is what you have control over. And you just write in that circle, me, because that's all you have control over is yourself.
Okay.
And then in that tiny outer circle, it's just slightly bigger
Yeah.
than that outer circle.
Uh-huh.
That's the circle of things you have influence on. It's not
Okay.
control over, just some influence. You may have some influence over your kids sometimes, or your spouse, or a friend. Those are people who might listen to what you have to say, but they don't have to obey you. They choose to
Sure.
listen to you.
Uh-huh.
And then everything outside of that circle, which goes on and on and on forever,
Uh-huh.
those are the things that are outside of your control.
Right.
And so all of that stuff is the stuff that if it falls in that category, you have to let it go.
Wow.
You have to really be
It's
right. I
big.
like the look on that face, right? Because when you put it in that visualization, how many things do you try to control every day? Jan, how many things that do we literally try to control that are outside of our control? We
Right.
can't control the virus. We can't
Right.
control whether or not somebody else wears a mask or they don't wear a mask.
Right.
We can't control how many deaths there are a day.
Right.
We are very upset and sad and we get impacted, but we can't control it.
Right.
And we get angry
Right.
and we have to let it go.
Yeah.
We have to focus on what is in our control. And what is in our control is ourselves. And how are we going to respond to this?
Right.
How can we make one step at a time? And we
Yeah.
can control what we do. We can mitigate our risk by washing our hands, by wearing our mask, by social distancing, by addressing our feelings. And that lowers our anxiety levels because we're taking control of what we can and letting go and not focusing on what we can't
Wow,
control.
Julie, that is fabulous advice. So, I mean, I guess what I hear you saying is, to write down actually write down, not just think of, write down, very different.
Yeah.
The pluses and minuses, and then see what you have control over, what you don't. I mean, this whole political mess on this week, we
Yeah.
don't have control over a lot of that. We have
No.
opinions, but
Yes.
not control. So
Yeah.
let go of that because we're already loaded up with so many
Yeah.
things.
And so what we have control even there when you're talking about what's going on with civil unrest and
Yes.
this political quagmire that we're in is
Mhm.
you can limit your media
Ah,
intake. You can limit your conversation with people who
uh-huh.
are on the opposite
Yeah,
sides of the spectrum that you are. It's
right.
not that you shun them away. It's
No.
that you limit the conversation until you're in a good place to
Yeah.
have a reasonable conversation, not a dialogue. I mean, not a monologue, but a dialogue.
Sure.
And the other person also has to be in the good place. So you
Yeah.
can set boundaries
Oh, nice.
on how to
Julie, you are
have.
so good.
Oh,
Great advice. I'm
well, that's
making
the,
I'm making notes.
you're making notes. Very good.
I'm telling you, and I'm a therapist, but you forget this stuff. I mean, it's
Yeah, it's
simple.
tough, it's tough because what we're experiencing all around us is it really is it comes down to taking control of what we can
Yeah.
and making those tough, you know, boundaries and limitations in
Right.
the moment
Right.
and loving the people in our life, whether they're the same or different in opinion and belief,
Oh, wow.
loving them for who they are and accepting them for the diversity. Diversity is not a bad thing. Difference is not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that they need to be shunned from our life. It just
Right.
means that we think differently.
Oh my God, Julie. Wow. Wouldn't we as a society be in a better place
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
people believe that?
Yeah.
That it's okay to be different. You don't have to agree, but to try to accept people just because they don't think
Yeah.
the way they
We
are.
have a long journey ahead of us.
Yeah, we
And
do. A lot of healing for sure.
yeah.
But I
Yeah.
like that. It's the same thing. In fact, one of our questions, and I know, we're getting a little down on time, but um given the COVID, and the fact that we all are doing this technology and being not social as you've talked about,
Yeah.
physically social with others, but doing this kind of technology is how to limit our time with technology when we can. And with
Right.
everything going on about, it's important to hear about the COVID and be aware of what's going on and the pluses and minuses and how that affects us and what we need to do. But, and same thing with the politics of the day and the civil unrest. But I think what you're saying, Julie, is we need, when we document how we're doing, we need to balance and
Yes.
see what we need to not do as much
Yeah.
as we to do.
Yeah. I think that's a really good way of, we have to put in the work and the effort, to balance. You're absolutely right. To balance the good and to balance the not so good.
Yeah.
Because
And
it's there. We need to know the detail of this, pandemic and this
yes,
civil unrest and what's going on in the world,
right.
which happens to be negative. But there's also good that's happening in the
Yeah.
world. And we need to find and literally seek that out. And that's what I was talking about in that journaling. When you look in the morning and you say, what are my goals? What am I grateful for? What is in my life today that I'm so happy that is
Yeah.
going on right now. That is actually
Wow.
actively seeking it out, which literally, gets our body to pump those
Yes.
feel good,
Yes.
chemicals, and it
And
starts that process.
right. And not to be Pollyanna and isn't life
No,
good when it isn't sometimes,
yeah,
but to recognize, document, take a look at the things that we do have that are good.
yeah. Don't overlook it. Don't minimize it.
Yes.
Maximize it.
Right. God, Julie, you're great. Honestly, w- I'd also want to ask specific issues with parents and young children that you have seen in your employee assistance program at Franciscan and just in general. What have you seen? So maybe people listening can say, "Wow, I stress with that too," or "I have anxiety."
Yeah, so right now, well, I can tell you the biggest thing that parents are struggling with right now is new math.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, that's the hugest thing, that I hear about. Like, I'm not supposed to be a teacher, so that is huge right now. Trying to balance their
Mhm.
education and literally this,
School at home thing. Mhm.
yeah, whole school at home, and trying to entertain children.
Right.
And I think, the hardest thing is trying to explain what's going on in the world in a
Ah,
language that kids understand,
uh-huh.
not overwhelming them. you know
Sure.
even for the kids as young as 4, they're seeing them
Yeah.
developing anxiety and experiencing anxiety. And so trying to be transparent in communication, but doing it in a language,
Yeah.
that they
On their level.
understand,
Uh-huh.
yeah, on their level, and trying to explain. A lot of kids see what's on the TV, and so they ask the questions. Why would somebody do that to the Capitol
Capital.
building?
Sure.
Why can't we go out and play? Why can't I see my friends? Why can't I go to school? So there's a lot of emotions that the children are experiencing. So it's teaching, maybe sitting down and teaching emotion words, and teaching them what they mean, and having open dialogue so that they can talk about their emotions, so that they're not holding them all into themselves. Limiting their social media time as well, so
Yeah.
that they're not burying themselves in social media. And
Uh-huh.
so we don't know where they're going on social media sites.
Sure.
Those can be, a dangerous, kind of rabbit hole for the kids to kind of jump into and never get out of.
Right.
Getting involved with them, and I know that this puts a strain on parents, but kind of going back to the old fashioned, board games and
Sure.
and that's what a lot of parents are saying that is positive with this time
Sure.
of being kind of quarantined to the household, especially now in the wintertime. In the summertime, they could play outside in the yard,
Right.
but now that it's a little bit colder, and the weather's not so nice, doing things together in the house, creating
Sure.
opportunity to maybe share, history with them, to share, genealogy with them, to talk about, what is happening, to eat dinner at the dinner table, to bring maybe some of those traditions
yeah.
or create new traditions with
Right.
the kids. Don't just let everybody be in separate rooms on separate computers doing separate things,
Yeah.
because that really does just keep everybody isolated in under the same roof.
Right.
So really trying to connect people in the right way during this isolation period. The isolation is what's really, really hard on the kids, because they're really at that age where they want to be with their friends, depending on whether they're teenagers, whether they're middle school, whether they're, younger kids. If they don't have that interaction, that's what we're worried about. Their
Where their heads at.
physiological, their emotional development. That's what we're concerned about by not getting them back into school, is that development and how that's going to impact them later on down the road.
So again, Julie, what you're saying is take time to have those conversations. It's okay. I love it when there's our little family comes and interrupts
I
us.
know, right?
I've had plenty of those, Julie. But I guess what I'm hearing you say again, no matter how old your children are, to poke the bear a little bit with them and say, how many times on the news can you see the craziness that happened in the Capitol building? One, to limit that, or COVID concerns, to limit that, number one. But number two, on their level, no matter what age they are, poke the bear with them a bit and say, what are your thoughts about this? What are you nervous about?
Yeah.
And address those. We have some really positive people on our staff at Doombrook, and we have one gal, that continually says this too shall pass. I mean, it's not going to be for maybe 6 months or a year, but this is not forever.
Yeah.
And it is so nice to hear.
Yeah.
And the fact that, in the 60s, you're younger than me, Julie, but in the 60s, we had riots in the streets and, in our hometown. So is ugh, that this is that's happening, it is not forever, and it's an impetus for us to work on these issues of racial divide.
And there's so much right now with the internet that kids can read that we don't know where that source is coming from. So wouldn't you rather try to have those conversations to give them correct information than for them to seek it out and not know where they get it from?
To make sure to take the time and have those conversations. Well,
Yeah.
Julie, honestly, it's what you said in the beginning, the Franciscan Alliance, all of your facilities in your mission is to help the helpers. So I think what I hear you saying is for parents who are struggling, and of course, Doombrook is an opportunity for them to get help, but Franciscan is also an opportunity for them to get help. And talk to your employee assistance program. A lot of companies, I mean, depending on the size and so forth, but they have people like yourself to call and ask and reach out to. Is there anything else that you'd want to say, Julie, about a parent who is struggling that might want to reach out, who to reach out to in addition to their family or friends?
Yeah, so there are some resources out there. I know that there's one which is 211 that they can call. That is a number for no matter where they're at in the United States, they call 211 and they can connect them with a resource, either a crisis therapist or a resource to whatever it is that they need. One of the things that, especially now that we're isolated, and I think this is something that I said earlier, and it's something that you guys are very familiar with, is that we worry about the safety of our children who may be in a home that there's physical abuse going on. We worry about our adults who are in domestic violence relationships that have right now are furloughed from their jobs. And so there's no one that is observing those behavioral changes or those marks. And so even if you can't, talk to somebody out loud, maybe getting a call on to that 211, or reaching out to somebody saying, look, I need some help, because there's no more of those anonymous calls that maybe something needs to be investigated, because there's just not those eyes being laid physically laid on those bodies anymore, because of the isolation, because people are more in the house and not leaving the house.
Right. And there's no commitment when someone makes a call. Just listen to what 211 or yourself or any company, or organization, just listen to what they have to say. You don't even have to take their advice, but know that there's opportunities and resources out there.
Yes, there's also a lot of apps that are out there. So like if they do have access to their phones, there's a lot of apps like, Calm is an app for like meditation and deep breathing and those kinds of things, which are very helpful for stress management and anxiety management. There's a lot of programs right now that are offering free services to individuals because of the pandemic, but there's so many things that are available right now that you can just get on the internet and find out which platforms are providing those services.
Well, Julie, you have given us such wonderful information. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do all these years. I know it's not easy, but gosh, you're a wealth of information. If someone wanted to talk to you, Julie, could they call you at Franciscan, and what would be the best way to do that?
So they could call me at Franciscan. My number is 219-662-3732. But more importantly, if their employer has an EAP, that's a very good start, because they provide free services to their employees. And if you know of a company that doesn't have an EAP service, trying to maybe connect with me, and I can talk to them about how to get an EAP service within their company.
Oh, that's
because
great.
It's a very good service to have. Just to provide that type of service is very important.
Yeah, wonderful, Julie. Well, I thank you so very much for your time and expertise. And these have been fabulous ideas, Julie.
Good.
And I wish you all the best this January and this new year. And thank you again for your time.
You too.
And we'll be in contact. We'll get the video to you and go from there.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right, Julie, you take care now.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.